This is primarily also to understand what are the challenges that in terms of the building that are going to be faced by the users, and so that we can take those questions accordingly. Would request everybody to type their questions in the chat box. Type their answers.
Anu, can you see the stream on YouTube now? I've started the YouTube.
Checking.
Yeah, you can?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So Nishant, what are your views on this? Do you think our buildings are going to be ready very soon for opening up?
So I'll give my 2 bits on this. Actually, I've been discussing a lot of our clients, who have factories in NCR, outside NCR, all over India, actually. And they've been facing a lot of challenges, and they range from, across the board. A lot of it is that they don't have any set guidelines which have to be followed to reopen their factory. So a lot of departments, the government has issued guidelines, but they're all advisory. So they end up depending on the local district magistrate to give them the guidelines and enforce those. Now, if someone has, let's say, factories in 3 districts, 3 factories in 3 different districts, he would actually be enforcing different guidelines to reopen his 3 different factories, which is very weird because we don't have any central guidelines that everyone has to adhere to. Uh, the next big challenge that they are facing is of course the material supply chain. That has been disrupted because interstate travel is currently on hold, as well as the interdistrict. So the supply chain of materials, both incoming as well as outgoing, is completely disrupted. And then, of course, there are challenges pertaining to the labor and how to create awareness, because a lot of our workforce is uneducated, and they're not fully aware of the importance of social distancing, sanitizing, and not enough. So, a lot of challenges that we have been interacting with.
Right. Saurabh Malhotra has written a question, Nishant. He feels that hygiene and social distancing norms whenever they start with 100% workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Hygiene, social distancing, and safety security. So that will include screening and everything that you may come across. That will become a norm. That has already become a norm for our firm when we are designing projects. Um, we're trying to advise our clients on simple things that they could do immediately to start, and then there are some long-term solutions which you can incorporate in your factories or warehouses or logistic campuses.
Right. Fair enough. Okay. There aren't any more answers. I think I would request everybody to make it more participative. Otherwise, it'll be, be prepared with the presentation, but it'll be a one-way kind of a presentation. It'll be nice to hear your views, because ultimately you are the end users, and you are the most aware of the challenges that you may be facing regarding the buildings. So it'll be nice to hear your viewpoints so that we can make them a part of the presentation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Please use the chat box. Let's make it as participatory as possible. In the previous sessions, we've been having a host of questions, and it's been great interacting. And I'm sure this one, you have a lot of questions and suggestions, really, up your sleeves. So please share them.
Yeah. Yeah. Karan Verma writes, people adapting work from home culture and for factory owners might use new technologies so as to maintain social distancing.
Yes, absolutely. And you will see in the presentation that there are a lot of things which technology can help sort out. And work from home, yes, it can happen for the the admin and that side of things for a factory owner. For an office, like we saw in the last session, work from home is going to be a norm for a part of the workforce. But for factories, when you're talking about manufacturing shop floors, unless you've automated your plant completely, work from home is still a long way away, because you will need your operators, you will need your labor on to operate those machines, to transfer the goods and things like that. A few of our clients, I'm happy to say, the factories that we've designed, they're fully automated, and we have very very few number of workers on the shop floor. But a lot of the industries we design in India are still labor intensive, and they depend on workers being on the shop floor.
Right. Uh, Very nice. So Vishal Gupta, he says queuing with labor is a concern. Very, very valid point.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. This is a big concern. Thank you for asking that, Vishal. We've included a lot of solutions in today's presentations, things that you can start implementing immediately. In fact, because the biggest challenge here is the education of workers. So I know, I know Vishal's factory from close up, and he has a lot of workforce in his factory, and the challenge that he would be facing is that they're not educated enough, and they're not aware enough about the need for social distancing, in fact. So what happens is, it's not in their DNA to queue up, it's not in their DNA to maintain that distance, and to sort of be patient, and while traversing through the factory or entering. So there is a lot of ways, and one of the ways which we'll be showcasing later is how do we actually make social distancing and queuing as part of the DNA of our workforce. So that's going to be very important, because you may put in a lot of controls, but ultimately the person who's queuing up has to be patient enough and receptive to the queue.
Right. So there are two more points. Quickly, I'll take them before we go on. So Mr. VB Mohan, he says cost of maintaining hygiene and sanitation has to be built in the cost.
Yeah.
Also, build a flexible environment to adapt to work with low availability of casual labor. So
Yeah.
it's a very, very valid point.
Very valid point, sir. I mean, we are so the cost definitely is going in all the project estimates now. So we have to build sort of the cost that comes with technology, the cost that comes to implement social distancing, etc., like you suggest, in our project buckets, not just for future projects but also for existing projects, because everyone is going to be looking at cash flows right now. It's been such a disruption, and we have to budget these in.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you. Yes, Michelle.
Nilansh Bansal asks, how do we make our manufacturing unit easy to use for the workers, keeping in mind the COVID situation?
Yeah, Nilansh, there's going to be a lot of solutions. I mean, we are going to be showcasing a lot today, and probably there'll be a couple which appeal to different people, different solutions for different types of factories. But the bottom line is that how do you actually make the worker feel comfortable? He was used to an environment earlier, and suddenly there's going to be new norms and challenges in front of him. So you have to make him comfortable and receptive to everything that you're trying to implement in your factory, and that's going to be a key. The awareness program, the orientations, they're going to be a key in bringing people on board with whatever changes you are bringing into your
Right. One last point, Pukhraj Sharma ji is saying labor gathering in the factory canteens during lunch hours is a big concern.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And a lot of factories have started with their cafes closed. A lot of factories are actually looking to reinvent the cafeteria system. We will be giving some solutions, but in any case, social distancing has to be maintained. Now, this is a double-edged sword actually, because at one point you don't want to allow outside food in the building because that could be a carrier. On the other hand, is your canteen actually equipped to provide the food to people? And if it is going to provide food, then how do you actually provide it? Do you provide it in the central cafeteria, or do you provide it at each person's work desk? And this is an important question that is going to come up in all discussions.
So I request you to now start the presentation. I'll read the introduction first. I'll start with a quote. Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. I think this was an apt quote for this scenario. Hello and warm welcome to the webinar series hosted by the Novak. Today I extend a warm welcome to all of you in the third session in the series of designing healthy buildings post-COVID hosted by our firm, the Novak Architects. Today's session is about redefining industrial and logistic spaces. Being a design and engineering firm, industrial buildings are a large part of our portfolio. Post-COVID, over the past 4 weeks, we have reassessed, reevaluated, and reworked several of those designs, layouts, and details. It's almost like a whole new world of design solutions is opening up. The whole perspective is shifting and new design concepts and technology is coming up. In today's presentation, we will see application of these new concepts through our projects as case studies and hope to offer some solutions to the participants, as well as initiate a dialogue and deliberation on this subject. The presentation will be done by my colleague Nishant Goyal, who is an architect, urban designer, and a smart city expert. He is also a LEED accredited green building professional and GRIHA evaluator with a keen eye towards implementing sustainability in projects. Over to Nishant.
So thank you so much, Manu, for the introduction, and I welcome you all to this third webinar of ours. Today is all about industrial and logistic spaces. So we'll be looking at factory buildings, warehouses, large food parks and industrial parks, etc. We'll deep dive into what are the solutions that you can implement in your projects. A lot of the solutions we are already proposing in our current projects, and hopefully we'll have an enlightened discussion at the end of it. How we've structured it is that I'm going to be giving the presentation for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have another 25 minutes for question answer and discussion and knowledge sharing after the presentation. Right. So yes, so what is this crisis? We've all got used to seeing these graphs, everywhere about negative growth and things like that. But let's leave the fear and the issues aside. Have we actually analyzed the crisis? Have we actually searched for opportunities within the crisis? So for me personally, a crisis always consists of 3 phases. Phase 1 is when we are completely engulfed in the crisis and nothing is in our control, which is probably where we are right now. And typically it lasts for the first 3 to 4 months. The phase 2 is when we sort of start opening things start normalizing. There is a bit of demand for our products. The supply chain starts getting on its feet. And this again lasts for another 3 to 4 months. Remember, in phase 2, you can also have recurrence of the crisis, because there's always a second wave or a third wave to a crisis. But phase 3 is the most important phase, because this is when things normalize, and this is when suddenly there is a spike in demand. There is a very, very high demand of your product. And this is where most companies lose out, because they've not done adequate planning in phase 1 and phase 2. We are so worried about the survival aspects in the first 2 phases that we've actually cut our production limits. We've actually downsized our company so much that when a high demand hits us, then we are incapable of fulfilling it. So always, let's look at the opportunities within a crisis. Currently, it's all over the news channels and the papers that how can India actually replace China as a global manufacturing hub post-COVID? Are our industries and manufacturing centers actually ready for that kind of demand if it were to shift to India? So how can our industries bounce back from this? How should I plan my built infrastructure? Of course, there is a policy and a government-related parameter about guidelines, about help packages and impetus to the industry. But that's something which is external. But at the same time, I would urge all of you listening, because you're all business owners, factory owners, industry owners, that please discuss about these things in your industry associations and start putting up representations to the government, so that when the policy is actually made and drafted, it takes care of all issues. The second part, which is probably the most important part, is your sales, people, process, and finance parameters of your individual factories, which you would probably already be working on with with the managers in your company. And the third main criteria is the built infrastructure. How does your building or your built infrastructure contribute to your economic growth now? How can I plan my built infrastructure to be COVID ready? And this is the topic that we'll be discussing today. At this point, I would actually, just to make it a bit more interactive, I'm going to run a little poll here. So, oh, it's not working right now. So Manu, can you actually run the poll from your system?
So we've launched a poll. You can see a question on your screen. And we would request you to choose an option.
So it's just on a scale of 1 to 10. How do you actually rate your preparedness for reopening post-COVID?
Okay, answers are pouring in. Very nice. Okay, waiting for some more answers. Thank you. Fantastic. It would be nice to hear from everyone. Yeah. So I think about 60% people have voted so far.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. So I'll end the poll and we'll flash the results.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So the maximum is 36% votes are for 6. And people have rated between 2 to 8.
That's great. I mean, that's great that everyone is thinking about this, and you've probably already shortlisted a few solutions, because that's a good high number to come across in the poll, and I'm extremely happy for that. And I hope today, we can give you some more insights into what you can add to your preparedness. So we'll start with two basic case studies. The first case study is the Volkswagen Germany unit, which has just opened with a truncated workforce. They're working on 2 shifts. There's a 1-hour time gap between the shifts, so that people can come in and go out without sort of interacting with each other. But what they've actually, a few things very interesting is that they've started stand-up huddle meetings on the shop floor. So they've done away with the in-room sitting down cluster meetings, and they've gone in for huddle meetings on shop floor, which are much quicker. And since there is floor marking, so people are standing away from each other, and there is a quick discussion, and you get on with it. So your management is sort of still on the shop floor, and you're doing those meetings. Their canteen is closed. The water dispensers have been removed. The HVAC system has been recalibrated for better fresh air circulation. And of course, there are a lot of sanitization and disinfection. They've introduced these transparent glass screens that you see on the bottom right, which act as partitions everywhere on the shop floor, whether it's between departments or it's actually segregating people on a production line. The second case study is from Amazon fulfillment centers in India. They've implemented social distancing through simple floor markings. The cafeteria has been reconfigured for a lesser seating and maintaining social distance. They've actually put in temperature scanning machines, thermal screening machines at various places. They've implemented sanitization stations. And for the high traffic areas, they've implemented plexiglass or barriers, as well as PPE kits for all the people who man those areas. Right. So how can I plan my industrial and logistic infrastructure? We're going to talk about 6 main parameters. And the first of those is something that we call assessment and planning. Now, this is extremely important. For you to take a holistic approach, you need to sit down with your team and make charts for each and every item. How are you actually currently managing the workflow, the materials, the people, the visitors? How do you actually stack your material currently? What are the logistics of it? How does it come in? How does it go out? How does it flow within the premise? What are the various administrative or the laboratory requirements that you're currently having? So once you have all the information collated, then you can implement solutions which are not haphazard but look at the entire picture in one go. If required, hire an expert to do it, or designate one of your project managers in house to make these sketches, to take photographs, and to put everything in one go so that you know exactly how your factory is functioning on paper today. The second thing, and this is a term that we've coined, is called box in box. So we are doing this in a lot of our projects currently, where if you see, if I show you a typical factory layout, the area in the blue line typically tends to be a large production hall, probably of a metal construction, the pre-engineered building construction, high volume with cranes running and things like that. And we have machines and various departments scattered all over depending on how my material flow is and how the factory is operating. Now what we've brought in is that we've made boxes within. So make sure that you channelize or you earmark departments. So like, let's say in this sketch I've made 4 departments, where the first one is fabrication, then 2 process plants, and then a QC packaging area. So so try and segregate these departments now. So what you'll have is you'll have a clean central line for all the material, etc. movement. You can now, once you've segregated and implemented a box in box, you can actually start innovating and making things like, you can stagger the in and out times of the workforce for each department. It could just be a 10-minute stagger. But like Vishal asked, how do you actually manage the queue? He's got more than 300 people working on a shop floor. So once you've got a department wise, even a 10-minute time stagger for each department actually goes a long way in managing the queues that happen for the entry and exit. You can start managing the cafeteria timings department wise, or even segregating it within the department. And then you can make a little threshold at the beginning of each department so that you can just implement a simple sanitizing or a screening thing at that threshold. The key here is to have these thresholds so that if there is any contamination, it remains in one area. It doesn't spread to other areas in your factory. The sketch below, it's talking about a warehouse project of ours, which earlier it was one large space. And now based on the shutter locations and the loading unloading bays, we've actually proposed dividing it into these 6 different boxes, so that and in warehouses you can do it as per your SKU requirements. So different types of SKUs could be grouped and put into one area and then another one for another, so that you actually limit movement from one department to the other department, and you actually start segregating things. Similarly, now, this is a large industrial cluster project of ours, which has numerous multiple, industrial units within same area. So we've started putting in thresholds at the entries. We started putting thresholds in front of the institutional area. Then there is a large common amenity area where the warehouses, the power plants, sewage treatment plants, cold storage, etc. So there's another sort of a threshold at the beginning of that. And of course, there are thresholds in the beginning of each individual unit. So suddenly you can still operate by actually limiting contamination and not being worried about contamination entering your premise from someone else's premise or from an external source. So how do you actually implement this box in box? Very simple. There's a lot of these movable screen types available, and I'll show you a lot of these technologies, which are actually very simple to do. The first one, like the image on the right, is just a fabric panel, which is from top to bottom. And then if you have a lot of cranes running in your unit, you could actually just have 7 or 8 feet high modular partitions, which sort of divide these departments and create these areas. You could have, fold down electric driven, retractable curtains. You can just have movable walls. You could just take drapes and do it. You could have little windows or slits in these drapes to establish visual connectivity. So again, simple curtains do it. Temporary sheets, either your scaffolding metal sheets or your transparent PVC sheets. Just simple, very simple curtain techniques which actually segregate your departments. And then please relook at all the thresholds. Try and make them touchless so that they are automatic doors which sort of lead you from one area to the other area. Because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to maintain these thresholds. It could be temporary stuff. Of course, this won't be very easily movable, but you could just go in for a temporary thing. So that is the box in box. The second most important factor is the people, the labor who's working in your factory. And safety and security is paramount because your people need to feel safe and comfortable. A lot of devices people are using, a clip-on sort of these buzzers on people's uniform. They're using thermal screening tapes. A lot of people are implementing cycles instead of walking within the campus. Social distancing, whether it's for food or whatever. Floor markings play a big role. And I really want to talk about this little photograph here. This is pledges. So a client of ours has implemented this, and so all the workforce twice a day has to recite a 30-second pledge, and in that pledge they are talking about implementing social distancing and hygiene norms. So when they recite this twice a day, gradually it's going to become part of their DNA and they'll start adhering to it with minimum control required. So it small things, but they can go a long way in actually getting the message across and changing people's way of life and adapting them towards the new hygiene. So floor tapes, like I talked about, very simple, very easy to implement, and give people designated places to stand and work. You can do it in warehouses, define it with arrows so that there is no cross traffic. You're assured that there's only going to be single way movement, minimum merging of people. You could put railings. And then these modular systems are available, simple modular partitions. So like this is an assembly or a packaging line that you may have with multiple people working on it. Another photograph here. You can just implement these simple screens where people have their own little safe zone for work. Another example of these modular social distancing screens available, different types. And then hygiene. You'll have to start looking at toilets, making things segregated there. Of course, you're not going to rip apart toilets and do the entire plumbing again. So better to implement segregation techniques, queuing techniques. You have a lot of queue systems. Please implement them immediately so that, along with floor markings. And then a lot of these common contact spaces, like the doors, etc. You get accessories now, which if you just clip on, you can actually use your elbows or arms to open it rather than your hands. And another interesting thing is, of course, the touchless sanitizing stations. And another interesting point I've come across is that because of the interdistrict movement being banned, a lot of while the workforce would be from the local village where your factory is and things like that, but a lot of your supervisor staff would actually be staying in the city and their movement has been hampered. So you might have to think of some innovative on-site shelter systems, where maybe your supervisor staff can rest or can stay for a couple of days at a stretch and things like that. That would be very important addition to make. Right, brings me to the third point, which is the material. So we talked about the box in box movement. So what it actually does is, from my raw material store, I can now start making a simple alley for material movement. And this alley can be sanitized, at, let's say, every 6 hours or 8 hours, just to maintain that level of hygiene within the campus. You can use UV hammer lights, etc., to in your material areas to actually as a disinfectant for them. touchless doors we touched upon. So please streamline material flow. Also, when you have categorized it into departments, urge your plant heads and your department heads to give clear requirements of the material that they need for that day, so that you eliminate the need to continuously take in and out materials from that department. Let it be a once or a twice in a day exercise where material is issued, it's processed, and then it's taken to the QC and packaging. For a lot of then look at some technology. I mean, warehouses can actually use a lot of technology to automate their retrieval and stacking systems in various ways. You could look at bioturbo machines, which have ozone chambers to give a better environment into the factory. These are technologies which were currently used only for cold storages and such systems, but you can use them in any industry to increase the the indoor air quality, so that it's easily disinfected and it's of a much better quality. Use disinfection mats. You get disinfection strips, from which over which vehicles can pass, which disinfect their tires. Logistics. This is a major issue because logistics is basically it it is the transport of goods in and out of your factory. So you are now dealing with external ingress. So they're going to be, your materials from your vendors that are going to come into your factory as raw material, and then there are going to be dispatches that you make. So how do you actually safeguard from this external ingress of material and people in your factory? So first and foremost, once you have these bubble diagrams, these charts ready, you can actually chart the most, the shortest way for an external vehicle to traverse inside your plant. So like in this unit, we've got a very short distance for the unloading, and we've got a very short distance for the loading vehicle to go out. So it actually, most of my plant actually becomes ingress free from external vehicles. It's just internal people there. Similarly, for warehouses, clearly demarcate, where the truck has to stand, clearly demarcate the threshold, keep a minimum distance there, so that you're not letting external goods or people actually make a lot of trips within your factory. And also ensure that all non-essential people, whether they are external people or your drivers, etc., they are they are kept out of your shop floor. It has to be a simple norm that no external people will be allowed on the shop floor. Right. Similarly, when you look at large logistic areas, like this is a container depot that we've done. In this, you have to highlight the ingress points. And here you might have to actually implement disinfection stations for trucks as well, because there's going to be a lot of in and out movement of trucks. And you'll also have to have an area earmarked where all your logistic vehicles, like your reach stackers, your forklifts, your various carts that are transferring material from one place to the other, are parked every now and then and disinfected and before they go to the next trip of theirs. Warehouse management systems. I'm sure you are already using a lot of these. A few of our clients have implemented complete automation in their storage and in their raw material as well as finished goods areas, so that they don't have human interface at all. But each one suits themselves, and you please discuss with your warehouse solution providers about how they can minimize people's contact, maybe through zone picking or through voice picking or complete automation. Then for things like waste management, etc., please ensure that whoever is collecting your waste is doing it in a clean, sustainable manner, taking it to the right dump site. Waste is not being scattered just haphazardly, because waste is a very, very simple and a big transmitter and a carrier of contamination. Implement robots if you have to. There are small robots, large robots available. Please find the right robot for your industry and start implementing it. Right, then we come to the services. Of course, ventilation is the main thing. The indoor air quality has to be at optimum level. ISHRE has specified guidelines for factories, and the major changes that they've done is is that now you have to think about at least around 15 air changes per hour within your factory. So a lot of factories which are enclosed factories have to now start looking at ventilation systems very, very critically, because that's one way for us to bring in a lot of fresh air and to mitigate biocontaminants. The other thing is that 70 to 80% fresh air shall be supplied inside industrial units to maintain positive pressure, so that we're not getting in air from outside in, but even if there is any leakage of air, it's from in to out. A lot of factories use evaporative cooling, so please look at techniques to disinfect water. Maybe UV lamps is one solution. Also, it's been advised that, after each working cycle, so after each shift or after every day, please flush out your evaporative cooling system. It would mean, running it without water for let's say half an hour to make sure that the cooling pads are dry. It would run. It would mean water circulating for 30 minutes to wash out any bacteria that has collected, and flush out the system and run it with fresh water the next day or something like that. So please look at your ventilation systems carefully. We are now re-looking at the ventilation systems of all our projects. And then energy and water. I mean, please bring in energy efficiency. There's very simple ways of doing it. Solar panels, biogas. Look at natural STPs, reuse water, recycle water, so that you're sort of not wasting any resource available to you. And look at the waste management system in your factory. So those are some of the things that we've highlighted. Let's drive change. Let's start talking about policy, building bylaws. Let's try and spread the word, so that all of us together achieve a good level of hygiene, safety, security within our industrial campus. We as a firm would be very happy to collaborate. If you want to have knowledge sharing sessions within your team or in your industry associations, please do reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. Please post in your questions on this seminar on the chat box. Even later, we would love to have your feedback. So thank you so much, and I hope it's been an insightful session, and I'm happy to take questions and suggestions now. Please, thank you. Manu, can you please take over?
Wonderful presentation, Shant. Very exhaustive. So a couple of questions started to pour in. I'll start. So Ranjan Sabuji asks, how much, according to you, will all these efforts and expenditure impact efficiency of the organization, considering that this pandemic is not here to stay? We appreciate the effort to ensure safety of manpower, but considering the fact that this virus will after some time die.
So, very interesting, sir, that you think of it like that way. But what is to say that we won't have another pandemic in 2 years from now? So you see, we had a lot of fire issues about 1.5 decades earlier, and we suddenly woke up to fire safety, and now fire safety is a norm for all our projects. Similarly, I think it's prudent to understand the challenge of today and make sure that we are future ready. Having said that, a lot of the techniques that I've showcased today are not cost intensive. And the idea is not to actually put in a lot of cost in this time of distress, but actually plan your your equipment and your decisions carefully after understanding the need of each factory. Each unit has its own needs, own way of working, own type of labor, own type of machines, own type of departments. And it's very important to implement simple solutions by which we can achieve the new hygiene and social distancing. Thank you.
Yeah. The next question is, how can we tackle the behavioral pattern of the workers if the things get worse?
Very tough, because most of our industries are very, very labor intensive, and a lot of the workforce is uneducated. It depends on their livelihood, on daily wages, and things like that. So panic creeping in is a very realistic probability. We would have to look at it at various levels. I mentioned the pledge. So ultimately, the new way of life and working has to be ingrained in everyone's DNA. To making them aware through simple steps about and making it comfortable for them to use the new hygiene. So talking about why you are actually giving them that PPE kit to work with, why you're actually telling them to stand on that little mark on the floor and not be close to each other, why you're actually making segregations in their areas, why are you actually reducing the size of the cafeteria in terms of people occupying it, etc., etc., why you may be actually telling them not to bring their own food from outside. So the more dialogue that we have with people and the more positives that we decide to share with them will go a long way. Yes, there are challenges and there is a crisis, but the more we tell everyone about the positives of the situation and how the institution as a whole is coping up and is sensitive to them, the more receptive that they will be for the changes.
Right. So actually, this is reminding me of the time when the worker safety gear was introduced in the construction industry,
Yeah.
and kind of boots and hats and stuff like that, and the kind of resistance that is there and it has been there, that they feel hot in the equipment, they're not comfortable, they feel comfortable without the hat, sometimes accidents happen and stuff. So I think there is going to be reluctance in adapting to any kind of change, but ultimately when people realize it's for their own benefit, they will adapt it. That's what I feel about this as well. Okay, a couple of questions. Any tech, sorry. This is my own question. Is factory design going to change post this pandemic in its essence? Do you think there's going to be a fundamental change in the very way the factories are designed?
So I wouldn't say there's going to be a fundamental change, but yes, there is going to be a lot of changes in the way we you can say implement or execute factories. So the construction will change, the construction styles will slightly change, but the basic layouting and everything is not going to change much because a factory design is dependent on the process for producing that good. So those machines are probably going to remain the same. The way you manufacture is going to remain the same. It's just the way you implement that process is going to undergo a tweaking. So for factories, I don't see fundamental changes, but yes, there are going to be tweaks in the way we actually implement our or execute our factories. Whether it is related to labor or material or logistics. So there is going to be tweaking done so that we sort of enable the new hygiene and the safety security.
Right. There's a very interesting question. It says, will making design changes in the factory setting make our work less efficient?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, a factory is the epitome of efficiency. If a factory is not efficient, then you're not going to make profit. So efficiency is paramount. When we design factories, we actually efficiency of production is the main thing. So that is a no compromise. So if there is some facet that enables efficiency in production, that definitely will not be compromised. You can actually tweak things here and there without compromising efficiency, and there are a lot of insights that we've shown in the presentation. Simple temporary modular screens and partitions, that can actually help you achieve things. Simple sanitization stations, thresholds. Creating thresholds is the key here, and thresholds need not actually hamper efficiency at all.
Right. Talking about the temporary partitions, there's a question related, I'll take it. Says temporary partitions wouldn't support fire safety requirements in industrial spaces, I guess. Will there be any design changes in layouts that we could foresee incorporating conventional fire rated separations?
Well, now it depends how you actually look at it. Now, a temporary partition can be fire rated. If it's a box in box, so you're actually saying that there is a larger box and then there is a smaller box within. The smaller box is not supposed to be a fully contained fire area there. It is just because 90% of the time in factories tend to be high volume spaces with cranes and gantries running. So it's not going to be sealed from the top. It's just a movement barrier that you've created. So your fire safety norms will remain mostly the same, which you were following earlier. Yes, if there are too many of these small boxes, then you may have to implement more of the fire equipments that we typically do in an open plan factory situation. But there's not going to be too much of a variation. Yes, the thresholds that you create. So let's say there's going to be like the entries. Earlier you used to have one door which was fire rated. Now you're going to have a set of double doors with sanitization, etc., and screening happening in between, and both these will be fire rated. So yes, at the starting and ending thresholds, you might actually incur some more cost regarding fire safety, but that is not a major cost that you're incurring.
Right. That's a very interesting question, though. Uh, so the next question is, with the new norms of social distancing coming into play, do you see the demand for the floor area might increase?
Yeah, we had an interesting discussion on this in the last session regarding offices. Look, this is a myth. Um, and I firmly believe that because by creating a box in box situation, you are not consuming more space. And the reason why I again stress the need for the first point, assessment of your existing premise. Please take out all those drawings, which were made when you planned your factory, and look at them critically. There'll be very simple solutions that will pop out. But if you're just not looking at data, at actual plans, as actual things on in front of you, then you're not, then you'll be stuck in this situation where you're sort of hypothesizing a lot of things, and this question will come up. But when you look at actual plans and layouts and material movements and workflow movements in your factory, you will find that you can retain the efficiency of your space, but incorporate all these uh, new hygiene and safety security norms.
Right. Very well answered. Very well said. In fact, to add to what you're saying, couple of options that we've very quickly gone through. Actually, this presentation we have to finish in a small time, so we've not gone into the details of each of the products. But some of the curtains that we have shown on those screens were actually industrial curtains, and as you can see, those were slightly different than the regular curtains that we have in our residential and office spaces. So they tend to have like double bars. They may have a bar in the middle from where you can hang some of the equipment, which your industry may require, and stuff like that. Because industrial scenario, the curtains have to be planned a little differently. So each of those products actually have a lot of technical sort of background behind it, and we would be happy to answer them to you if you contact us after this presentation for that. Okay, coming back to the questions. There's a question by Dinesh Gangadharan sir. It says, is there a possibility that future factories may be built modular in terms of both production spaces and support infrastructure with options of independent operation of modules? Very interesting.
Very interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I think a process engineer, I would have to discuss it with a process engineer to come out with the solutions, because a lot of times in certain industries, yes, you could do it, because it's like it's like a kit of parts. A lot of products are a kit of parts, which sort of, and these parts could be made in different modular units, which may be scattered at the same site. So you could actually start having, let's say a 10-acre plot, and you would have these little modular sheds. So currently we design one large process shed, and we put everything inside it, so that there is a minimum time taken from one department to the other department. So who knows, a lot of industries might actually look at creating these small little sheds now, which are these modular production centers, which could increase or decrease depending on the demand of the product, and house these different departments away from each other. Yes, that could happen in new construction, and why not? Um, but it would have to be seen. I mean, it would depend on process to process and factory to factory. Like, so for example, I mean, something that comes to my mind is we've designed a factory which had a 200-meter long coating line, which was a self-sufficient line in itself. You fed material from one side, and then after 200 meters, you got the finished product. Now that would have to be in one shed. But yes, if this coating line were to be divided into a kit of parts, and if it's possible to still manufacture with enough efficiency, then you could actually have these little modular units scattered, which would do one product, then the next, then the next, and then the next. Yes, it's possible for new construction.
Super. So the next question is, how about sanitizing the entry and exit points more so that the basic problem is taken care of at the starting point? This might reduce the effort required to make minute changes which might affect efficiency.
Absolutely, sir. The entry exit points are most important, and that's why what we're actually saying. And but you see, what happens is the minute you put in a threshold, it sort of uh, it sort of makes it a bit more time taking. So if you so I again go back to Vishal's question in the beginning: how do you manage the workforce? Which is queuing up. So so by creating a threshold, you've a threshold is mandatory, a threshold with sanitizing and hygiene and security and screening features. Now that threshold has to be put in where your material is loaded, unloaded. That has to be put in where your labor comes in from. That has to be put in where your visitor and your office staff comes in from. That has to be put in where your logistic sort of trucks, etc., are moving in and out. Now, the minute you start putting in these thresholds, then you have a problem of queuing up and too much time being taken. So the minute you start then implementing box in box and you've sort of got these departments, then you can start staggering time for people to come into work. And so that, you don't have one peak hour, but you sort of averaged out the thing, because we are working with factory owners who are dealing with even thousands of workers in shifts. And, it's, a lot of it to do with, and it's all about streamlining the material flow and the worker flow, because the process has already been managed at the design phase, but in the implementation phase, it's all about managing material and workers.
Right. So there's another question which says, how do we approach you if you want to make our factory in line with COVID, as you won't be able to visit the site physically?
So just reach out to us, and we have a lot of innovative ways. I mean, who would have thought that we could be discussing things over a webinar a couple of months back. So there are a lot of ways in which we can actually look at things remotely, and face-to-face interaction may not be required. So please do reach out, and we'll be happy to help. We have a lot of tools for that as well.
Yeah, there's one last point. It says, Jayakumar sir is citing, have the central and state governments initiated policy changes with a view to redefining buildings or spaces based on the prevailing pandemic situations?
Very interesting question, sir. In fact, um, this is one of the sticky points here, because all the guidelines that are coming out are actually advisories. And I was discussing with a few clients, and they said it's actually chaos, because let's say a gentleman has factories spread over four districts, or make it even worse, he has factories in 4 states. Now, interstate travel is gone, inter-district travel is banned. You are relying on the district magistrate, the DM of that district, to give you that certificate that your factory is COVID ready and you can operate. Now, that DM will formulate his own set of final guidelines, which you have to implement. The DM at another district or in another state would give you a different set of guidelines. So suddenly you will be looking at a situation where you may have multiple plants, and you may have to do multiple things at the respective plant to actually implement and go forward. Now, the problem here is that the government itself, is still formulating its guidelines, because everyone is learning each day, and there are no set sort of norms for you to follow. So that's why it's very zone specific, district specific right now. But I'm sure in the times to come, in the recent future, we will have specific guidelines which will be common guidelines. And I hope, please take this up with all your industry associations. Please put it in the policy. As designers, we would love to have it. In fact, we're already campaigning for this, that let's look at the building bylaws and look so that when we now get our building sanctioned, there is a set guideline, and you just follow it, get your approval, and ensure that everyone across India follows those guidelines, which are common, and not haphazard things, which you as a sensitive person may follow, but the person next door may actually just not follow anything and still be functioning. So I mean, policy change and policy reviews are very important.
Fantastic. We have 3 more minutes to go. So I have something that I wanted you to speak about was the UV sanitizing options, which I think you kind of very quickly talked about those on that one slide.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking that, Manu. I'm sorry I didn't elaborate much on it, but UV light is a proven disinfectant. In fact, a lot of people, I think, attending the session today are from this industry, and I would urge you to look at UV light solutions as disinfectants. Now, the so we have a lot of requirement for disinfectants in the material storage area, whether it's the raw material or the finished goods areas, or where you store your tools, tackles, etc. We have a lot of use for this in warehouses, um, etc., etc. So uh, please, research and elaborate and discuss with your team as to what is the best kind of, you can speak to experts about it. What is the best kind of solution for your particular type of material? And UV light is a proven disinfectant for most cases, and it's easy to implement. It's not very expensive. You could make little UV tunnels. You could make chambers. Like I showed an image, you have these UV hammers which have a range, so you can install multiple units of them. So you can actually customize and make these chambers very, very quickly uh, and seamlessly in your existing premise. Of course, for proposed ones, we're doing it, but even for existing ones, you can do it.
Okay, so this says, are there any health hazards related to UV lights?
Not really. Not any predominant health hazards related to UV light. In fact, it's supposed to be good because it's a disinfectant. So not really. And UV light. See, the issue here is that UV light as a disinfectant needs a certain time of exposure. So in any case, it's going to be more effective for material handling areas.
That's a very, very good answer, Nishant. And that reminds me of that last presentation that we had with our team. So UV light is a whole subject which a lot of research has been done. In small doses, it is also given to water to disinfect it. The AquaGuard technology had been using UV technology, and I think yeah, material handling would be the right application for it. So there's a question from Dad, which says, with the recent UP government guidelines, labor working hours can be up to rupee 12 hours per day. This may help in reducing number of labor at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Great suggestion. I mean, this has helped. However, there is also another. So earlier we used to all talk about 3 shifts. It's probably going to be 2 shifts now. I mean, UP has already implemented 12-hour working. A lot of other states have. Um, what it's actually doing is that, yes, it's cut down the number of labor, but it's also cut down the transition time. So basically, you are supposed to have a time, sort of a time lag between 2 shifts now, because you have to sanitize your entire premise. You have to make sure that people coming in for a shift and going out from one shift don't mingle. So you have to, and a lot of times it's a 1 hour time delay in between. So by reducing the number of shifts from 3 to 2, you actually, increase your efficiency by an hour. So yes, it's a great suggestion. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, that I think brings us to the end of the session. It's 5 p.m. and there aren't any more questions further. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, everyone, for attending and making this participative. It was wonderful interacting with everyone. Some fantastic suggestions here, which also helped us evolve our thought process. And fantastic session, Nishant. Closing notes from you.
Yeah, thank you, Manu. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We will be sharing an abridged video like we do after all our such sessions with you all, so that you can go back and refer to it for any of the things that you liked. Please do send in your feedback and suggestions on the link shown to you. It will also be sent to you on the social group. And please block your calendar for the next session. It's on 16th of May, next Saturday. And this time we're going to be looking at smart cities and smart campuses, which is the need of the hour. And how do we actually look at it, look at this issue at an urban level? We've been talking a lot about local plot, individual plot levels, but we're going to be taking this to a new sort of scale now and look at it at an urban or a city or a campus level. So please do join us then, and please keep the feedbacks coming. It's very motivating for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.